Hello, welcome to Love Lifeline. I'm Brian. Today's topic is about childhood trauma, and it's unfortunate I have to speak about this, but it's become a chronic situation, a bit of an endemic situation in modern days. That childhood trauma is far too common, unfortunately. I know this myself. I suffered quite a bit myself, and I've met quite a few people who also suffered, some a lot more than myself. This is something we need to address because what happens in childhood doesn't stay there. It comes with us in our minds, of course, and in our behaviours as adults, and that can and will affect our life in some way, in a negative way. It will affect our mental health. It will affect how we relate to other people. So it's something we have to be mindful of and address. Unfortunately, many parents themselves are ignorant. They're not aware of their own personality traits, problems, addictions, drug addictions, so on. They themselves have often been brought up in a toxic environment themselves. Their parents were most likely like themselves. For example, if our parent or one of our parents was an alcoholic, it's highly likely one of their parents was as well, or at least a volatile person or addicted to some substance. Drug addiction is rampant in today's society, unfortunately, and some of these people have children. So unfortunately, for many, they're brought up in a very, very dangerous and toxic environment, and this affects the way we relate to people. It affects our behaviours and our mental health. Also, other traumas that may not be related to parents. It can be things such as bullying, which I went through in high school, and isolation, a lack of loving relationships with our family, a lack of friends, which I also suffered, feeling isolated and alone, having no one to talk to. So we'll still be affected by these issues. So they need to be looked at. I strongly recommend anybody that's suffered some kind of childhood traumas, or as an adult, of course, to speak to a psychologist at least a handful of times to get some clarity on why they behave the way they do if you're not aware, or if you are aware of the traumas you've gone through. For example, if your parents had addiction problems and you also have addiction problems, perhaps you don't relate the two. You're not aware that what we see as we grow up influences us. When we have good people, good positive role models around us, we generally become good positive people ourselves, well adjusted. When we have toxic people around us with bad habits or bad attitudes, then unfortunately we often end up adopting those habits subconsciously. One of the things for myself I was very mindful of is, and again I'm not being critical, he didn't understand. It was the way he was brought up. My father was pretty much absent from my life, and for many reasons. Work was one of them. Then my parents divorced when I was young, but even in reconnecting and spending time with him, it was very sad in that he lacked the ability to show love. He would occasionally say the words, but it was a struggle. Some people were brought up in times, and back in his era, men weren't to show emotion such as empathy and love and kindness. They were brought up to be tough and strong and silent type, and not talk about problems, not talk about feelings. So with many adults, it's unfortunately many parents, they're just not aware that how their behaviour affects those around them. They're not necessarily evil people, although there are certainly some that have some mental conditions such as psychotic, sociopaths, and narcissists that deliberately enjoy hurting people. There's an argument whether that was, again, those conditions are nurture or nature, whether they're born or with those conditions, or whether they're raised in toxic environment, or a bit of both. I personally think it's a bit of both. You can have good children come from bad parents. You can have bad children come from good parents. So we need to note down these things that have affected us. We need to find a support group, first of all, psychologists. He may recommend, if we have any very strong mental health problems such as severe depression or anxiety or bipolar, for example, he may recommend medication. And if it's very severe, if it's impacting on how we interact with other people, interacting with our ability to work or get out of bed in the morning, then I recommend looking into medication. I fortunately don't believe mine was as severe enough to warrant medication. There's pros and cons to medication. Do your own research. There's a lot out there, some very staunchly in favour of and some staunchly against. Again, with most things in life, I think just balanced approach is good. I think a good yardstick is if your past is causing you so much dysfunction that you just can't function healthy in your life, whether with work or you have addictions, then it's time to reach out to a professional and get some medication and other tools that they will teach you how to deal with the things that have happened to you. And again, like most problems, if you identify them, that's half the battle won. Many people just refuse to admit the issues that they have. I'm sure if you're here, you are not one of those people. You are somebody who realizes they have issues and they want to be better people. So that's why you're here, to learn some tools, some information perhaps, or interact with others who have been through things that you have also been through. Another way to deal with our trauma from our past, whether it's a childhood or bad relationships in the past, is to keep toxic people away from us. Often people such as drug addicts or alcoholics, when they do manage to get clean from the addiction, they stay in the same neighbourhood or areas and mix with the same people who are still addicted, and this is a really bad thing. Any counsellor will tell you that you should distance yourself from those people, either physically move or in some way have firm boundaries with toxic people, whether they be drug addicts or just someone who's a negative person, overly critical person with anger issues. In general, this is something I'm a big believer in having strong boundaries. If it's someone we can't avoid, like a close family member or an ex-parent of our children, for example, or a work colleague in a job that we can't leave for various reasons, then we need to implement strong boundaries. This is something I struggled with when I was younger. I'm only just beginning to get better at it. When we meet someone and we recognize they are negative in some way, whether it's anger issues, whether it's narcissistic traits, whatever it may be, we need to put up some boundaries. It's not being mean, it's being healthy to ourselves. We need to keep those people at a distance. And if they try and talk about things we know will upset us, we need to let them know politely not to talk about those subjects. For example, a co-worker, if they want to talk politics, and that's one of the things I will list down in the description not to talk about on this channel. There's many places you can do that, because it causes so much division and argument. If that occurs, you can politely say, please, I don't want to talk about politics. And then you can also do something like suggest another topic. But did you see the Olympic Games or did you see the game such and such, whatever it is, or the new iPad, whatever. Change the topic is another good idea to distract the person. Have something to replace them, not just a no, but I'd like to talk about this, or that I'm interested in this. You could talk about a hobby or something on a superficial level. So it's not as if you're being antisocial, like, no, don't talk about it. But you offer something else like, yes, but I'd like to talk about this, or whatever. That's another way to keep us healthy, keep our minds healthy. So all those things, I'd like to leave you with the message that you don't need to let a bad, negative, or toxic childhood stop you from having a prosperous and happy life. There's many inspirational stories out there that we don't have to let the past define our future. We can determine in our hearts that we will not be like those, insert their names, parents or whoever, that have hurt us, mistreated us in the workplace, in families, in relationships that we have had. Be determined to be a better person and not be like those people that mistreated us. Be a better person. Separate ourselves and go on to have a happy and successful life and a much better life than those people. Anyway, if you like what you hear here, I have more topics I'd like to talk about. And as always, if you'd like to contribute, ask anything, ask some other advice, or if you'd like have a topic you'd like me to bring up in more detail, or one that I've already brought up but in more detail, or something I haven't brought up yet, please let me know in the comments, or if it's something too personal. Again, I guard against sharing too much personal information, as in identifying information on yourselves. If you'd like to give me an email, lovelifelinecontact@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. It doesn't matter what your situation is. If you need some other advice, if I don't know, I may be able to point you in the right direction. I've been learning for about over 3 decades, so if I don't know something, I can look it up and give you some kind of advice, I'm sure, even though I'm not a professional in any scope. I'm not charging for my service. I'm just somebody that's lived a fairly long life, fairly eventful life in terms of relationships, and I just like to share what I've learned from experts. Thank you anyway again for joining me.